It was the summer of 1943, 2 years into the United States' involvement in World War II, and a bloody sea battle was raging between American destroyers and the famed U-boat submarines of the Third Reich. In the Philadelphia Naval Yard, a newly commissioned destroyer called the USS Eldridge was being equipped with several large generators as part of a top-secret mission to make the ship invisible to radar and win the Battle of the Atlantic once and for all. The subsequent events became known as the Philadelphia Experiment, and spawned a conspiracy theory that claimed that the US Navy conducted an experiment in 1943 in which the USS Eldridge, a naval destroyer escort, was made invisible to radar. According to the theory, the experiment was conducted at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in Pennsylvania and involved the use of advanced technology and electromagnetism. The experiment was allegedly witnessed by an ex-merchant mariner called Carl M. Allen, who was stationed on the SSS Andrew Pharnaces, a vessel docked in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard sometime around October 28, 1943. Allen detailed an exercise where the US Navy tried to make the destroyer escort USS Eldridge invisible and the strange consequences that ensued afterwards. According to legend and Carl Allen, the experiment was carried out in October 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard aboard the USS Eldridge, a US Navy Cannon-class destroyer escort. In the experiment, a force field was created that made the ship invisible to radar and the human eye. Ashore and on surrounding ships, the experiment was observed by hundreds if not thousands of sailors. Unfortunately, according to Allen, the ship mysteriously teleported for a while to Norfolk, Virginia, over 320 kilometers away, before mysteriously reappearing at the Philadelphia shipyard. The crew of the Eldridge was said to have experienced a variety of negative side effects as a result of the experiment, these including insanity, being, quote, locked in place, never being seen again, and being plagued for years by enigmatic incidences of phasing in and out of existence. And in the aftermath, every claim has been rejected in classic Navy ways. But of course, I'm sorry to the listeners who wanted to believe in this conspiracy theory, because, well, none of the aforementioned events truly occurred, and the US Navy did not make a warship completely disappear in 1943. What follows in the rest of the video did actually happen. The secret of the mysterious experiment and its terrible aftermath was kept secret from the public for 12 years, until one day, when American ufologist Morris Jessup, the author of the 1955 book The Case for the UFO, was unexpectedly summoned to the US Navy's Office of Naval Research, otherwise known as the ONR. A copy of Jessup's book had been mailed to the ONR, and was jam-packed with handwritten notes in the margins. The notes appeared to chronicle a discussion between three people, but only one of them is given a name: Jemmy. They were all written in the same handwriting, but in three distinct shades of blue ink. The writing described two separate kinds of humans that live in space and referred to one another as, quote, gypsies. Their text had a protracted discussion of the merits of different components of Jessup's assumptions in the book and used non-standard capitalization and punctuation. The ONR wanted to know whether Jessup knew anything about who the author was and who delivered the book to them, since alongside the incoherent ramblings, it exposed all the specifics of the Philadelphia experiment. Jessup instantly recognized the bizarre writing. Carl M. Allen, under the ingenious pseudonym Carlos Miguel Allende, had written him a number of letters claiming to have seen the Philadelphia experiment. The first of Allen/Allende's more than 50 handwritten letters directed to Jessup was delivered to him in 1956. Allen claimed to have learned about unified field theory from Albert Einstein personally, and he ridiculed Jessup's simplistic comprehension of it in his 1955 book. For those not in the know, a unified field theory, which has never been proven by Einstein or anyone else, attempts to merge the forces of gravity and electromagnetism into one fundamental field. Allen provided Jessup with his first-hand account of the 1943 disappearance of the Eldridge from the Philadelphia Naval Yard from a neighboring ship as evidence that a unified field theory exists and the American military was exploiting Einstein's discovery to transfer a whole Navy destroyer and its crew. Of course, Jessup had dismissed Allen/Allende as a crackpot. Nonetheless, the Jessup book, with Allen's scribbled commentaries, gained a life of its own when the Varro Manufacturing Corporation of Garland, Texas, who did contract work for the ONR, began producing mimeographed copies of the book with Allen's annotations and letters to Jessup. First, a dozen were printed, and eventually 127 copies were created. These copies came to be known as the Varro edition, and became the heart of many Philadelphia experiment books, documentaries, and movies to come. But of course, Every single fact that Carl Allen offered as support for the existence of the Philadelphia experiment has been conclusively shown to be a fabrication. For starters, the USS Eldridge wasn't put into service until August 27, 1943, and stayed in dock in New York City until September of that same year. Although supporters of the story assert that the ship's logs may have been fabricated or may still be secret, the reported October experiment supposedly took place while the ship was on its first shakedown trip in the Bahamas. In a related, more damning development, the Philadelphia Inquirer covered a reunion of servicemen from the USS Eldridge in Atlantic City in 1999. The crew claimed that the ship never docked in Philadelphia, and despite there being thousands of potential witnesses, Carl Allen remained the lone witness of the otherworldly activities related to the Philadelphia experiment for many years. That was until Al Bielek, a man who claimed to have participated in the covert experiment, came out many years later. Al Bielek claimed he had been brainwashed to forget the experiment and only came out many years later because, get this, his suppressed memories resurfaced after watching the 1984 film The Philadelphia Experiment.
Medical team, report to Hangar Bay 1 on the double. Report to Hangar Bay 1 for transfer.
We're almost alongside. There's been a fire. It's still burning in some places.
Get a camera.
There are men moving about on the deck. They appear to be pretty badly burned. My God. There's a man buried. He's in the steel. He's buried in the deck. I can't describe it.
And despite the persistent and frequently changing statements of both men, it was a third witness's evidence that eventually provided some insight into what may have actually occurred in Philadelphia during 1943. French astrophysicist and ufologist Jacques F. Vallée wrote an essay titled, quote, "Anatomy of a Hoax, the Philadelphia Experiment 50 Years Later," in the Journal of Scientific Exploration in 1994. In this piece, regarding the supposed Philadelphia experiment, Vallée requested readers to get in touch with him if they had any further details. Vallée then got a letter from Edward DeGean, a US Navy veteran who served from 1942 to 1945. DeGean had previously worked aboard the USS Engstrom, which had spent a period in 1943 in dry dock at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. Since DeGean was a Navy electrician, he was well aware of the secret equipment placed on both his ship and the Eldridge, which he claimed was present at the same time. DeGean stated that the devices weren't teleportation technologies created by Einstein or aliens. They were instead degaussing devices that allowed the ships to jumble their magnetic signature. Large wires and high voltage charges were used to zap the ship, and although a degaussed ship wouldn't be undetectable to radar, it would be to magnetic torpedoes fired by U-boats. Alongside this, DeGean revealed that the Navy exploited interior canals, which were closed to civilian ships, to complete the voyage between Norfolk and Philadelphia in 6 hours as opposed to 2 days. This explains Eldridge's odd entrance in Norfolk and abrupt return to Philadelphia. Many years later, the US Navy released a response to the Philadelphia experiment tale, which is available online. As you might guess, it simply states that they have no idea what this man may be talking about, along with the whereabouts of both ships, their current activities, and comments from their officers. Although interesting, the report is entirely predictable. Jessup made attempts to publish further books about UFOs, but this was entirely unsuccessful, and thus, on April 30th, 1959, he committed suicide in Florida after losing his publisher and going through a string of negative life events. As for Carl M. Allen, the various book writers who tried to get information from him found his responses elusive or couldn't find him at all. One reporter from Allen's hometown of New Kensington, Pennsylvania, interviewed his family and was handed a pile of documents and books, all scribbled with Allen's annotations. They described Allen as a, quote, fantastic mind, but also a drifter and a, quote, master leg puller. But with the conclusion and debunking of this tale comes a simple question. The Navy ONR initially called Morris Jessup into their office to discuss the oddly scribbled book. But why did they call him if there was nothing in his annotations that generally held any truth? This has been me, Jack, and if you're on an invisible ship right now, leave a like down below.